Hey, it's Mike Hambright. Welcome back for another exciting Flip Nerd VIP show. Today I have with me Clint Coons, who is a founding partner of Anderson Law Firm. He focuses on asset protection and tax reduction, and he's an active speaker, a noted author, and a lot of other things. Has some great information to share with us today on tax strategies and what are the right legal entities and how to keep yourself out of trouble a little bit. Before we get started with today's episode, let's take a moment to recognize our featured sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Clint, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you're on. So, one of the things that we were talking about just before the show here is, after I've been in this business, when you become a veteran in this business, after you've been doing it for a few years and get a bunch of properties under your belt, you start to realize how important it is to have a good attorney and a good tax advisor on your team. And it's one of those people, they're the types of folks that people told you from the very beginning, build your team, make sure you have a good attorney, make sure you have this, and you didn't really feel the immediate pain. You didn't know you needed it until you needed it. So glad that we've got you on to shed some light on these critical areas today.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, is that a lot of time you really don't know how good your team is until you're involved in an audit or you're being sued.
Yeah.
And hopefully by that time you've had the right advice.
Yep. And it took me a while to learn that. You're right. So, and then, you get to a situation where you thought you had a good attorney, but then you get sued, and then he's like, well, I'm going to hand your case over to somebody else because I'm busy right now. It's like, wait, I thought you were my guy. So anyway, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and about how you got into the practice of law in the real estate space?
Sure. My background is, I like to refer to it as real estate. When I was a kid, my dad was an avid real estate investor, and he basically brought my brother and I up as indentured servants to his investing. So we'd go out there, pick up nails, whatever we could, and then I became a framer. And so there was a time there when I was going to college that I actually contemplated becoming a contractor. But in '92, with the economic downturn that year, I found myself doing a lot of pickup work, cleaning up other people's messes on homes. And it was, I live in Washington State. It's always raining. And I thought to myself, this is not what I can see myself doing for the next 20 to 30 years. So I continued on to become an attorney. And what I brought with that was, this background in construction, in real estate investing. So I saw the challenges that people face, especially my father, when it came to owning properties. His father was an attorney, and not one time did his father ever sit down with my dad and say, you should really consider doing something a little different from an asset protection standpoint. And so my father was flying naked. He would settle suits. That's the most economical way to handle lawsuits for him, because he had such a high risk of loss because everything was in his own name. In fact, when I graduated law school, that's when he got his first asset protection structure implemented, his first LLC. Because, of course, when I get done with law school, I'm now a different type of indentured servant. I'm on permanent retainer for life. So we structured them then.
Yeah. So, and did you go straight through? Did you go straight through from college to law school?
No, I took a year off. During that year off, like I said, I was framing for that time. Also worked, you're going to love this, as a plumber as well.
All right.
2 jobs.
Yeah, that's cool. And when you were going to law school, did you know you were going to focus on real estate law?
My focus was tax and business planning in law school.
Okay.
Yeah, law school isn't like a trade school. You go there, they teach you the basics, and then it's really up to the professors and what ideology they have as far as what you're going to learn. So you have to pick it up on your own.
Yep. And so are you an active real estate investor yourself?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And so that's like, what you mentioned at the beginning of the show. There's so many attorneys out there that talk about asset protection, business planning, tax planning. But when it comes to real estate investors, I'm sorry, but most of them just don't get it. I've looked at plans before, and I'll tell my client, yeah, you've got a really good plan here, and it will protect you in a lawsuit. But the problem is trying to get financing with that plan, because ways sometimes attorneys will structure people, it looks good on paper, but in the practicality of using that structure in your everyday real estate investing, that's where it falls apart. And so you got a closing that you thought might be within 45, 60 days, and now you're looking at 90 to 120, and you have to go back to the seller and keep asking for extensions because underwriting just doesn't understand what you're putting in front of them.
Yeah.
So that's a key component when it comes to protecting people, understanding that side of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what are some of the things that, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see real estate investors make from an asset protection or a legal protection standpoint that are fairly easy things to put in place?
Trying to do it on their own.
Yeah.
See a lot of people go to LegalZoom, try to set something up for $800, $900, and they get a document that they don't understand what is in there, and they don't understand what should be in there as well that's not there. And so as a result of that, people have these structures that they think are going to protect them. And that's why we talked about this at the very beginning, is that you don't know how good it is until it's tested.
Right.
And so I see that as a problem. Many times the documents are deficient. The other issue is that they don't know how to run them. I have a client here in Washington, and this is a situation where I created the entire structure for this person. And no matter what you told her to do, she was her own worst enemy because she wanted to run it her way.
Right.
And her way just didn't comport with the law. And as a result, when the plan got tested, it failed. And it had nothing to do with the structuring. It had to do with the fact that she didn't have bank accounts set up for each of her LLCs, because she had 6 limited liability companies, and she thought, because her CPA told her, she could run it all through her corporation, the management company. And from a tax standpoint, the IRS would be happy with that because he could account for it, which they were. But from an asset protection standpoint, the court was not happy with the way she ran it, and they just basically blew through everything.
Yeah, so you're saying that kind of pierced the corporate veil, as they say? So,
exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. In my case, I don't talk about this a whole lot, but I've unfortunately been sued a couple times in the last few years due to, things that were no wrongdoing on our part. It's just a litigious society, and we got sued for something that, was in some instances very frivolous. But you don't really realize that anybody can sue. I mean, you hear this, anybody can sue anybody, but, they're suing us and all of our entities and us individually, and it gets kind of scary when you start to, you go to your attorney or to our insurance company and say, well, here's the lawsuit, and they say, well, you're not covered for that.
Yeah,
you're covered for, for fraud, for example. It's like, well, I didn't do anything fraudulent. Well, they can still sue you for it. Mm-hmm. And it's in some states, in the state where I'm at, Texas, apparently they always throw fraud into the mix because you could get triple damages. So anyway, it's a scary world unless you like you said, you don't really realize what you have until you've been through it, and then you tend to way overprotect yourself probably, so that you don't have to deal with that.
You mentioned lawsuits. Well, a big source of litigation right now for attorneys is toxic mold. And so, I have properties that this has been a concern of mine in the past. In fact, one of the properties we bought a couple of years ago was flooded by the prior owner because it was a repo. And I couldn't sell it because it actually made the news, the local news in Las Vegas, and nobody wanted to buy it because they were concerned about mold in this property. But the thing is, when it comes to mold, it's not covered under your insurance because it is an environmental contamination. So you're on your own for that. And what's so scary about it, there was a show on ABC, I don't know if it's still on there, it's called The Lookout. It started last year. I watched the very first episode of this show, and they had these mold remediation experts called in, where they wired a house, they put little cameras, microphones everywhere, they had 2 microbiologists go through the property, and they said there's not a single mold spore in this property. So then they start calling these guys. They called in, I think, 6 of them, and they asked them to come in. Now keep in mind, these are the same people that a plaintiff's attorney is going to call as an expert witness in a trial to determine whether or not there was mold in your property, your rental.
Yeah.
Called in 6 of these guys, and I think 4 out of the 6 stated there was mold in the property. And their techniques were laughable. One guy went up and sniffed the sheetrock and said he could smell mold behind the sheetrock. And he wanted $20,000 or some ridiculous sum to remediate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so what are some of the things that folks that are kind of real easy? Obviously, aligning yourself with somebody that knows what they're doing. Are there any? How about folks? I know a lot of folks don't set up a legal entity at all. There, and you talked about I think you said your father was the same way. Properties in your personal name. Obviously, that's not the best thing to do from a tax standpoint either. But just talk about some of the basic things like that folks can should avoid, I guess.
For my real estate investing clients, if they're buy and hold, what I'll typically start them with is a land trust and then flip that land trust into a limited liability company. And the reason we use the land trust is to avoid the due on sale clause in the mortgage. So when you buy a piece of property, if it's encumbered by a mortgage, you want to get it directly in the LLC for asset protection. But the problem is, if the lender discovers that transfer, then they can accelerate the note. And let's face it, interest rates are going to go up. The Fed has already stated their intention to raise rates. So there's a strong incentive for lenders to look for people who have transfer title just to take advantage of that clause and get a higher interest rate out of you. Right. So the way you avoid that is set up a land trust, which is a grantor trust, move it in, it avoids the due on sale clause issue, and then you assign that interest to your LLC for asset protection. And it does work. It does protect you.
Yeah.
In that matter.
And is that something universal that you could do across the country, or is that a state by state?
That's if you go to your local attorney, you bring up the word land trust. If you don't live in one of those handful of states that has actually adopted it by statute, he's probably going to tell you can't do it, or he doesn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But you can, in fact, do it in any state. You can set these things up. They're either recognized by case law or they're recognized by statute. Now, there's some differences in how you set them up. Depending on the state that you need to be aware of when you create a land trust to ensure the protections are there. Yeah. Generally speaking, they're available everywhere.
Okay. And in terms of your practice, do you practice? Are you practicing from coast to coast? Are you across the country, or do you specifically focus on certain states?
Coast to coast. We teach a lot of workshops to real estate investors on asset protection. I mean, I was just recently in LA. Before that, I was in South Carolina teaching an event. So we bounce around the country, bringing this information to people.
Yeah. And what percentage of your business would you say is single family type investors versus commercial?
I would say it's probably about 75%.
Is single family?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
And we have a big wide range. We have people that like to flip properties. We have wholesalers, commercial, and then residential. So you find even private lenders. So you find that sometimes you have people that are dabbling in all three.
Right.
And it takes a different entity for different types of strategies.
Right. So speaking of legal entities, one of the questions that I'm commonly asked is what type of entity somebody should set up if they're getting started, or maybe they've been flipping houses or wholesaling houses for a while, but they want to start keeping some properties as rentals. And I often start off my answer with, you need to ask your attorney this, but here's what I know. But what do you typically advise people? I know it's going to be different based on their individual situation, but what's the general advice that you give people in terms of what to consider, whether it's an LLC versus an S Corp? Not a lot of folks doing C Corps, but
yeah. So you hit on a couple points there. If you're going to flip properties, I'm going to recommend you do it through an entity tax as a corporation. A C or an S really depends on your individual tax situation, where we're going to go with that election. Yeah. But the idea there is to avoid dealer status. So I want to get that activity out of your name and not flowing down onto your 1040. Then for those that buy properties and hold them long term, it's going to be a limited liability company.
Let me ask you, so you said to get out of your personal name. So an S Corp is typically going to flow through. So you're saying you would typically recommend a C Corp then if folks are going to flip property?
No, it's how it flows through onto your return that's so important.
Okay.
As we talked about earlier, part of our practice is legal, but the other side is tax.
Yeah.
So when we're preparing returns, we want those returns to look a specific way so that they don't give rise to audit. I mean, in 2011, the Treasury General came out and told the IRS to begin auditing real estate investors. And they've gone after them with gusto over the last couple of years.
Yep.
So
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and continue with rental properties. What's your general advice then?
Yeah, so with rentals, I mean, I would tell people to set up an LLC, and the question often comes up, when do you set up a limited liability company? If you don't own the property yet, you need to set up an LLC. And that depends on how you're going to take title. If you're going to finance a property, it doesn't matter. You can wait until after the property is acquired before you structure yourself. If you are going to pay cash, or if it's an REO, you better have that LLC in effect prior to going and putting your offer in. Because what I've found in my own investing is that the banks have changed on this. They won't allow you to take title in an entity different than what you send the earnest, or where the earnest money check comes from, or how you sign the PSA.
Yeah.
And same with getting title on that. It's a problem. So you want to have that entity in place if you're going to be buying for cash. And what's key here when talking about the entities is that so many people on the internet or marketers talk about Wyoming, Delaware, Nevada. And we do a fair amount of business in Nevada entities, given we have an office in that state. But there's a lot of misconception. Real estate investors think that they can set up an entity in Nevada and then go and buy property in, let's say, Georgia. And possibly, sometimes you won't even register the entity there, which is a huge problem, because if you want to evict a tenant, you're not going to be able to do it because you're not licensed to do business. But you do register there. I mean, the assumption that people operate under is that now I have a Nevada corporation, so all the Nevada benefits trail into Georgia. And in fact, they don't. It's a huge mistake for investors to set up these entities in other states and then register them to do business in the state in which they're working, because all they're doing is benefiting the incorporator. That is the person that's charging them these annual fees to maintain their entity. And so there's an art to putting these structures together. I tell real estate investors, set up your entities in the state where the property is located. So we'll set LLCs up, let's say in Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and then we'll create a holding company, an LLC in a state such as Nevada, that will own all of your out-of-state limited liability companies. So that Nevada LLC is never going to conduct business in either one of those states that I just mentioned. It's solely going to stay in Nevada. It's going to own your separate LLCs. That does two things for you. Number one, if you don't live in a community property state, all of those single member, or all of those LLCs you set up for your real estate will not have to file federal tax returns if you do it this way, because they'll be disregarded single member entities. Second thing it does for you is that you have the asset protection of that Nevada LLC. So if you yourself are sued personally, they can't take your LLCs that are in Georgia and Florida, South Carolina. They're completely protected. They can't bust that Nevada LLC because the charging owner statutes in Nevada are so strongly in your favor, they're not even worth going after. And the last thing you need to consider here is that when you create that entity, I strongly encourage my investor clients to set it up as a partnership for tax purposes, to avoid producing Schedule Es that have multiple properties on them. This is what the IRS is looking at right now. Real estate investors with long-form Schedule Es that have a lot of expenses there. When you have a LLC treated as a partnership and all those properties flow into one return at 1065 that produces a K1 to you, you're able to massage it so that it doesn't create any red flags that are glaring that stand out on your individual 1040. So you get quite a few benefits from going down and setting yourself in this manner.
Yeah. It's crazy. I talk to my wife about this all the time because she is, unfortunately from her standpoint, our CFO, our tax person. She is our in-house attorney, all those things, although she's, none of those technically, but plays that role. But it just gets to a point to where sometimes you feel as a real estate investor, or probably any small business owner, that you're spending half of your life trying to figure out how much you owe the IRS, how to minimize it, and how to stay out of trouble, legally, even if you're not doing anything wrong. So,
yeah, absolutely. The next shoe to drop is going to be those self-directed IRA investors. The IRS this year has targeted real estate investments inside of IRAs and corporations or LLCs that are owned by IRAs by forcing the IRA custodian to start reporting on their IRA account holders what type of investments, if they fall within certain categories, which I just mentioned. And that's just part of the overall announcement by the IRS several years ago that they are going to focus on real estate investors and how they hold their investments. And unfortunately, most investors that I run into that have set up a self-directed IRA have done something wrong, and it's just a matter of time before they get audited on it.
Yeah. So would you say generally those folks, because there's some pretty big, well-known companies that are structuring these people, would you say it's people that are not working with those folks that most people would assume, wow, I'm working with one of the big guys here, so I should be safe, or is it even some of those guys may be doing it wrong?
Well, it's not that I think they're doing it wrong. It's that they basically set you up and send you on your way. And then they will just stand back and say, hey, I set up a self-directed IRA. I didn't tell you what you could or could not do. You're on your own now.
Yeah.
If you don't know the rules, then you're going to run into problems. I mean, there was a recent case, tax court case with a self-directed IRA where an individual had an LLC set up, owned by their IRA. They had rental real estate in it, and they were doing their own accounting for their rents on a monthly basis. IRS said, nope, sorry, that's a prohibited transaction. You actually added value to your IRA, so we're going to ding you on it. You see people who are borrowing money using non-recourse loans in their IRA, and they're not paying taxes on that income that's generated from that because they don't know that they have to pay taxes. Their IRA custodian doesn't tell them this, so they're basically hanging them out to dry.
Yeah.
And what's sad is that you can solve all of these problems. Don't set up a self-directed IRA or roll your money out and put it into a self-directed pension like a profit sharing or a solo 401k, and you take your scrutiny down from ultra high down to really low because of the nature of the plans and how they're looked at by the service and DOL.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about, I know that you spend a lot of time educating the investor community about some of the things we talked about here. I know you have an event coming up in Las Vegas as well. Tell us a little bit more about how people typically tend to work with you and your firm, and then a little bit more about how they could find out more.
Sure. What's unique about our firm is that we look at each person, of course, as an individual. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Right. And the way we structure our clients is that it's a flat fee. So we approach everything not on an hourly basis, because I worked for an attorney like that in law school, and I'd lick envelopes for one day out of the month, and we'd send these out to clients, and they were never happy with the bill that they received.
Yeah.
So our goal is to, take both the tax, the asset protection side, put them together and create a plan for somebody that's maximizing both benefits. And, they can work with us we give you a free consultation. You can come to our website at andersonadvisors.com or give us a call at our phone number, 800-706-4741, and just ask to set up a free consult. Our firm has several attorneys that will talk to you about asset protection and explain to you what you should be doing. And like I said, there's no charge. If you want to become a client, we're happy to bring on more clients. One of the things that we offer that's unique is that for our clients, you have ongoing support at $35 a month is what we charge for our, what we call our platinum service, where our real estate investor clients, all they have to do is call us, and they can spend 3 or 4 hours a month with an attorney, and that's all they ever pay. So it's worked out quite well.
So you have kind of a subscription program where you pay $35 a month and you have access to advice.
You have access to advice by attorneys.
Yeah. Okay, well, I know you've got at least one new customer right now, so.
Hey, we reserve the right to cut you off at any time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, heck, even if you get a few minutes for that, it's probably well worth it. So, awesome. And I know you wrote a book, so I want to learn a little bit more about the book, but I'd like to hear also about the experience of writing a book. Have you written any other books, or is it just the one?
I'm in the process right now of 2 books that I'm working on, going back and forth. I hope to have one's on just general asset protection, because people kept asking me, Clint, do you have something that's just not so real estate centric? And so I decided to bust one out when I was halfway through my second book on the real estate side. So I hopefully I'll have both of them will be out this year.
Okay.
What does it take to write a book? A lot of patience.
Yeah.
I'm one of those, I can't type when it comes to writing. I have to write everything out on legal paper because that's just the way I think. The thoughts flow.
Yeah.
And the first book I wrote, it took me 2.5 years. And finally, my wife just looked at me and she said, you just got to quit, put that thing down. It's good enough as it is, and get it out there so people can absorb that knowledge.
Yeah. And that book it's called Asset Protection for Real Estate Investors, right?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Okay, so Amazon, I know you sell it on your site. We'll add links to all the sites you mentioned for Anderson Advisors, and then you sell it on your website as well, right?
ClintCoons.com, correct.
Yeah. Cool. So, and tell us a little bit about, why do you write the books? I'm actually thinking, I started writing a book about 2 years ago, so it's about a quarter baked, and it's sitting in my Dropbox file somewhere. And somebody recently told me that I need to finish that up. So, well, do you do it to help, obviously, acquire or network with more prospective clients and things like that? Is it something that, you feel like you have great information to share? Of course, you feel that way, that you have great information to share, and that you need to kind of get that out there. Talk a little bit about Because I suspect, a lot of our listeners are very entrepreneurial, a lot of people with great information themselves. A lot of my folks that really like the show the most are guests or prospective guests of the show as well. And a lot of folks that I know have written books or are thinking about it or in the process of it. So I just love to hear your thoughts on kind of why you do it.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Or did I answer the question for you already?
Well, you kind of did. I mean, you're right.
Yeah.
It is a great tool to bring in clients.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found with clients is that the more education I can give them, the better off they are to work with. Because it's so difficult working with somebody who does not understand any of the topics we're discussing, because they end up invariably screwing it up. And so by giving them my book, if they purchased it and then they read it and they start to understand the strategies, and what I tell them sinks in. But for me, I mean, besides that, I just enjoy writing. I mean, I write a blog, and many times the chapters in my book start as a blog article, and then I start writing them thinking, you know what, I just want to keep going. And I just flows from there.
Expand on that,
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to add links for your firm and you and how to get access to your book, all those things down below. Any kind of parting words on folks that are, let's say, just getting started in real estate investing, some of the things that they should think about as they get started?
The thing about it, when you get started in real estate investing, asset protection is really important. Many people, CPAs, attorneys will tell you, wait until you've got a bunch of assets before you go out there and put things together. But you can just never predict when a lawsuit's going to hit you. You don't know if you're going to be audited. And so taking simple steps now, you don't have to be complicated, but you take simple steps now, you ensure that if anything does happen down the road, you're protected from day one of your investing.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of investors who make that fatal error. They go up, they print business cards in their own name, they start going out there and trying to put deals together. And then a lawsuit can develop 6 years later, and they can be held liable for what happened before they had that entity in place, and then all their personal assets are at risk. So it's just not worth it, especially like we talked about earlier, in this litigious environment today, where you have so many attorneys out there looking to make a quick buck.
Right.
I wouldn't do it.
Right. And I even know from personal experience, we were consolidating some legal entities to try to make our lives simpler this year. Mm-hmm. And we were really kind of handicapped by some of the things we could do, because if we moved it into certain entity types, it would be considered a sale and be a huge taxable event for us. And so we were limited by the fact of decisions that we made years ago. So I think it's important to make sure you get those things done right up front.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that, I often tell people, spend the money the first time, get it set up right. And then after that, do you need the attorney to set up the rest of your structures? If they're all the same, I tell this to my clients. Hey, once I got the first LLC done for you, if you're buying 7 properties in Georgia and you want 7 LLCs, you don't need me anymore, because you have my docs. You see what I've done, and each LLC that I create after that is going to be exactly the same as the first one. So if you know how to use a word processor, you can protect yourself.
Yeah.
But that first document is so key to doing this.
Yeah. Great. Well, and then do you want to tell us a little bit real fast about the event you have coming up in Vegas?
Yeah, this is called our INCU. It's a 3-day event where it's taught by the attorneys and our CPAs in our firm, where we go into subject matters, talking about real estate investing, land trusts. We get into the taxation of these entities and things that you should be doing on your tax return to make sure that you're not raising any red flags, deductions that are often missed. So it's more of a higher level class for people. So there is some base level knowledge we expect that people are going to have when they come there, that they understand what an LLC is, because we're not going to spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
Basically, we want to take people and make sure that what they have is being fully optimized, or if they're missing some components, what they should put into place to make sure they're going to be protected in 2014 going forwards.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today, Clint. We really appreciate your insights and information.
Great.
And again, for anybody that wants to learn more, we're going to have access to how to get a hold of Clint many different ways down below the video here. So, Clint, have a great day. Appreciate your time.
You too. Take care.
All right. Take care. Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry. So get on over to FlipNerd.com.